dimineața și din partea mea și vă mulțumim tare mult că sunteți astăzi alături de noi. Ca un mic preview, și am să las pe colegul meu, vom aduce astăzi Viena, aici vom aduce Londra, Stockholm la fel, iar pe urmă, plecând de la premisele puse de Sorin pe masă cu acest one-off, ne-am gândit la această provocare, pentru că vedem, iată, suntem pe val și avem zile de aur, cum putem să capitalizăm mai bine acest succes din vara acestui an, pentru că până la urmă mulți investitori care nu au mai avut treabă cu bursa de la București au investit la această companie și au descoperit în mod evident și alte companii. Tibi?
Într-adevăr, plecăm de la premizele lui Sorin și încercăm să răspundem la câteva întrebări mari. Cum menținem lichiditatea și cum o creștem în continuare? Cum continuăm eforturile pentru dezvoltarea și promovarea bursei, dacă ne referim la indicii pentru piețe emergente? Ce urmează după cea mai mare listare, adică ce mai poate urma după cea mai mare listare din istoria României? Cum păstrăm investitorii și cum aducem alții noi și cum creștem jucători naționali prin intermediul bursei. Primele discuții vor fi one-on-one cu unii dintre greii brokerajului din oferta hidroelectrică. Jürgen Prumetz, Head of Corporate Capital Markets, Erste Group Bank, ne va spune care a fost rolul Erste în tot acest proces de listare, un rol aparte și cum arată acum piețele. Înainte de asta aș vrea să mulțumesc și partenerilor evenimentului, Bursa de Valori București, Arops Transilvania, Bitnet Group, Dentons, Holde Agri Invest, One United Properties, Restart Energy, Roca Industry, SafeTech Innovations, Sfera Franchise Group, Transilvania Investment Alliance și Transport Trade Services. Now,
we can switch to English if my colleagues have Jürgen on the line.
If we have...
Hi, good morning, Jürgen. Can you hear us?
Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. I hear you. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you very much for accepting our invitation, Tibi.
Mr. Prumetz, you are one of the heavyweights of the brokerage in Hydroelectrica offer. Erste played a key role in Hydroelectrica's IPO, was actually the global coordinator of the offer and stabilizing agent. And I want to ask you, what was your role exactly, and how was the listing viewed from the Vienna's offices?
Yeah, first of all, as Erste, we are a financial institution deeply rooted into the region. So our role typically comes to build a bridge between the global coordinators, global Anglo-American banks, and also the local requirements. And to combine these two type of standards, we played an intensive role. Typically, such kind of transaction is a cooperation between all banks, where everyone is jointly working together in order to achieve the transaction. We as Erste had a primary responsibility in looking into the prospectus, in also aligning together with the local lawyers and our local colleagues from Deschiderea in the alignment with the authorities, and obviously also in approaching the investors. We have a very strong investor base, which is not the super large size players only, but also medium sized players who are focusing on emerging Europe. And that is what we had brought on the table, and I think we successfully brought it on the table. As Erste, developing local stock exchanges is one of our key strategic goals, and that with this transaction, we were able to prove also in Vienna that it is possible, and we perceived it as a landmark transaction, not just for Romania, but for the overall region in a time when everyone was a little bit concerned in doing transactions. And also I would say that it had a very strong recognition on a European level. And that's where we are proud that we had been a part of it.
In this context, I also, another topic of discussion is related to the pace of IPO listings in Europe and globally, and what the Hydroelectrica listing meant for our market and regional markets.
I would say it first told to the market participants that IPOs are possible. And that was a very strong and very clear message. Second, we should not forget at what time the transaction started and at what time we have implemented. It still was a time, and still is a time, where you have geopolitical tensions, and Romania is very close to these tensions. So Hidroelectrica proved that despite all of that, it is possible to have a transaction. Second, your colleague first showed a little bit about the liquidity and the challenge which is still necessary to focus on from a local market in order to increase liquidity. But what Hidroelectrica also showed is that there is a strong and deep market in Romania, a deep market not just from an institutional side, but also from a retail side, and that there are a number of market participants who are eager to do transactions on that market. There was a very clear, and in my point of view, a very smart decision by the decision makers on the local governments that they really pushed for a Romania-only listing. And I think that's also one of the key messages to the region, that Pečari is here and is ready to absorb transaction. Of course, I also have to admit that the type of business in which Hidroelectrica is active is a little bit decoupled from the overall macroeconomic environment. Energy is still the key food everyone needs, every industry needs, and every business needs. And therefore, it has a strong perception on the international investor base. Second, Hidroelectrica, or the management of Hidroelectrica with its workforce, was able to build a company with very strong financials as well as a very strong and clear strategic guidance in a renewable business. And that is obviously also very attractive, the combination of growing in that area, being a key participant of energy transition, as well as also a strong dividend player. But despite this decoupling, I think that at the end, Hidroelectrica showed also to a number of other participants they should think of doing listings. And what we also already see is a little bit more optimism in private equity houses, in key shareholders of companies, that they are willing to reconsider, start working on IPO in a broader region. At the end, what we need is sufficient food on the menu of stock exchanges, and that's probably the key challenges which have still to be made, and that's also always dependent on the macroeconomic environment. But Hidroelectrica was the first sign it is possible to do transactions.
Jürgen, when you first started the roadshow about the IPO of Hidroelectrica, what was the first questions of some of the investors who hadn't had any dealings until then with the Bucharest Stock Exchange?
Well, I would not necessarily say that this was a part of the roadshow. It was more or less a part of momentum building. We had a number of pre-meetings, which you typically have with selected investors, also raising the awareness. I would say the key concern investors had was with regard to liquidity. Because it's a sizable transaction, which automatically, due to its size, brings liquidity. But at the end, people were a bit concerned that there will be too strong focus on long-only investors from the local market, who will then not be willing to sell off shares in the aftermarket. Because it's nice to have a good book at the beginning, but the best book doesn't help you if there will be no trading afterwards.
And one more question from me, Jürgen. Half of the offer was bought by local investors, by Romanian investors. Were we expecting this kind of appetite?
Well, it was, I would say, we were expecting from the institutional side strong demand because, it's a must-have investment, to be honest. And therefore, it was logical that the majority of local institutional players want to have it. We were also quite sure that there will be strong retail demand. But I would not be honest if I would not unveil that we were surprised what big amount is coming out of that market. And obviously, some of the investors have looked to historical transactions and they're convinced that they really need to make the right offer. or the right, I would say, order to get an appropriate allocation, but also the aftermarket develops that there is still a strong demand on the local side as well as on the international side to look into that stock. So the retail demand was probably the biggest surprise, and it's something which your country and your stock exchange can build on. But it is necessary to keep the right balance between retail and institutional, as well between international and local, and the long only, but also accept that aftermarket will be driven by hedge fund participants as well.
And from my part, the last question, really the last question, I promise. I'm glad you've seen my colleague's presentation about the liquidity on equity here in Romania. We have around 20 million euros per day. So we are in line with Budapest, but below Warsaw. 3 points, if you can share with us, what can we do to increase the liquidity?
First is bringing right transactions. So not transactions with a certain market capitalization, which will be interesting for international investors, and offer a reasonable free float for them to look into. Second, I strongly believe that it is necessary to open up the market in a way that international investors are attracted, so that it will be relatively easy for them to make trading decisions and not have an over complexity regarding that. And the fourth or the third element, I would say, also Warsaw was a very strong and long-term development. And when you look at the beginning, where the overall financial system and pension fund system was built in a way to attract investments, over the last years, we didn't have a large size IPO this year. I mean, there might be one or the other transaction on Poland, but I think the big privatization run is not really there. It's more getting into the opposite. And I think the privatization topic is an element which Romania can work on. And I would not see it from giving away assets in a Romanian hands to international investors, but opening up companies for governance, opening up for transparency, as the government also showed with Hydroelectrica, is a good and healthy sign. So in a nutshell, increasing liquidity requires offers available with free float and an easy investment opportunity.
Thank you very much, Jürgen Prumetz, Head of Corporate Capital Markets at Erste. Thank you very much for this discussion.
Știu ce spun.
Nu ne primiți în Schengen, în judecată cu voi. Noi, Nemo, nu am pus nicio presiune.
Uite,
am fost revoltată pe subiectul ăsta mereu.
Cu presiune. Știu ce te interesează.
După ce dronele au dat alarma în România, acum s-au mutat în Bulgaria. Până și ele preferă litoralul bulgăresc. Au fost la noi, s-au convins de condiții.
Știu cum să te fac curios.
Are inteligența artificială conștiință? Să empatizeze și să aibă conștiință exact ca noi? Nu.
Știu cum să te emoționezi.
Simona Halep a fost suspendată 4 ani pentru dopaj.
Clar că este finalul carierei.
Nu cred că discuția despre venirea de tenis este importantă cât despre imaginea ei.
Știu să conving.
OMS vrea să afle cum a luat naștere COVID-ul.
Ar trebui să aflăm odată cum facem să scăpăm naibii de el. Șanse ca România să mai cumpere aceste variante noi de vaccin sunt spre zero.
Știu să câștig.
Mamă, ce pe val ai fost!
Ne întâlnim în tie-break.
Știu, deci știi.